Tuesday, the 4th, I think. Today I am going to be processing one of the legs of pork that I bought on the monthly shop. So I thought I'd bring you along. So I'm going to peel potatoes while I'm talking. One of the big things about living off-grid and on limited income is the ability to make everything stretch and to make use of all of everything that you do. So one of the things that we buy is the rolled legs, shoulders, rolled pork roasts from Costco. They're only $6.99 a kilo. I normally aim for ones that are around about the $50 mark, and I buy 2 a month, generally speaking. With those rolled roasts, what we tend to do is we either make mince and then make sausages, or we use that breakfast mince in that marinated mince in frittatas, or on wraps, or in burritos, or on pizza, anything really. Or we cut up into chunks and we can it, and we raw pack the pork in jars with a little bit of salt, and when you open the jar, it's basically unflavoured pulled pork. So we use that in the same way as you would pulled pork on flatbreads, again on pizza, in pasta, in salads, just anything really. It's very versatile, which is why we like it. The other thing we tend to do is use part of the rolled roast to smoke, which is one of the things I'm going to do today. So we cut off about 1/3 to 1/2, a nice chunk, and then we cover it in a Dijon mustard and then a dry rub and smoke it in the smoker. We've got a dual fuel smoker, so it has a LPG gas on it as well as a little fire pit at the bottom. I have never tried running it without the gas, just because it's more convenient to maintain the temperature with the gas, but at some point we might try maintaining it with the wood only, probably something like a beef that doesn't really matter if the temperatures are fluctuating too much. Pork, chicken, probably stick with the gas until we figure it out. The other thing I do is the roast comes with rind on it, so I slice all the rind off and then I slice it into little chunks, and I do a couple of big trays of potatoes, which is what I'm peeling potatoes for at the moment. I cut them up and I put the strips of rind over the top of the potatoes and then bake them in a really hot oven. What happens is the fat renders off the rind and goes into the bottom of the pan. The potatoes cook in that fat, which is really tasty. We eat the rind as much as we want. The rest goes as treats for the dog. And then we pull the potatoes out and I pour off that rendered fat into our lard jar to use to fry things off in as well. So that way we're using the entire roast to make multiple meals. So the potatoes end up being a side, a snack, sometimes most of a meal, and a side. So we probably get 1.5, 2 meals out of the potatoes if I do 2 full trays of them. Whatever doesn't get eaten in the first meal just goes in the fridge, and they heat up really nicely, they crisp up really nicely in a cast iron pan in a little bit of lard on the stove. So we just reheat them to use however we want. Last time I think I actually threw them in a soup, so I was making potato and sausage soup, and I just threw what was left of the baked potatoes into the soup. They floated because they got air in them because of the way they're baked, but they tasted really good. So that's another way to use them, is just to throw them in a soup or cut them up for a frittata or with scrambled eggs, or we use them in plenty of ways. So they get roasted up really nicely. That way we get to keep the lard, and the crackle gets cooked up as well for snacks or for dog treats, however it works out. If they don't get eaten while warm, they go a bit chewy, so we don't tend to eat them as much, but the dogs are happy to eat them. So for now I'm going to finish peeling these potatoes, and then I will pull the roast out and I will cut the lard off. So I'll bring you back when I'm ready to do that. Alrighty, so cut up all the potatoes, put them all in these cast iron trays, which I really like. If I can find a link for them, I'll put them in the comments down below. Highly recommend these cast iron trays. And this is the pork. So, let's see, it was $6.99 a kilo, 7.3 kilos, $51.62, and it's a boneless rolled pork leg roast. Best before date on this one is today, because I've been a bit slack with the prep for the month with Christmas and stuff happening. So I'm not going to mince any of this one because I like to marinate it and leave it in the fridge for a day before putting it in casings, and then casings have to be refrigerated for 24 hours, or I cook it up, but either way it's going to sit minced for a while, which I want at least a few days left on the best before to do that. So I'm going to cut part of this up for smoking as a roast, and the rest I'm going to chunk up and can in jars. Now I have the Ryobi battery fan going over here across the food, which will help with the flies to a degree, but there will still be flies, and if that bothers you then maybe you shouldn't watch. Because it's Australia and it's summer and there's not a lot we can do about it except for try and keep as many away as possible, get things done as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to cut the nice evenly sized piece off the end that we use for the roast, which I'll just put there for the moment, and take the elastics off these because I'll use them to help roll that roast up when I cook it. Let me just grab a food cover for that piece that's sitting idle. Alright, so the first job is to take the rind off. So I've sharpened my knife, and all I'm going to do is start slicing it away from the meat. Now when canning it, you want some fat, but not too much, because if you've got too much it will interfere with the seals on your jars. So I can leave a little behind on the piece that I'm going to chunk up for canning, but you don't want to leave too much. On the piece that I'm going to smoke, again, you can leave some behind, but you don't want too much because it'll just create too much liquid dropping to the bottom of the smoker and will create too much smoke that will flavour the meat badly because it's burning. You want to try and get minimal meat on the skin that you're putting on top of the potatoes though too, because it is more inclined to burn, whereas the fat will just render out. So it's one of those balancing things of getting enough, not too much. And when you're going to mince your pork, of course, you want a significant amount of fat because that's what makes your sausages tasty and stuff. So there we go, that's got minimal meat on it. I'm going to put that under the cover and we'll start slicing this up. So I'm just going to cut it into strips. Just like this. Follow the scoring that's already there to make it easier on myself, and then cut it into smaller pieces so that it renders down in the time it takes the potatoes to cook, and I just layer it all on top of the potatoes. There you go, one tray done. So on to the next one. Alrighty, both trays are done, so I'm going to drizzle them with a little bit of avocado oil and pink salt.
You use avocado oil?
Avocado oil, yes.
For crackle?
I use whatever oil I've got, but I happen to have avocado oil at the moment. Head out of the way, please. Next step is to make the dry rub for the pork. So I don't follow a recipe as such. I throw a lot of stuff in and I like how it tastes. So it's about 1/2 cup of homemade brown sugar and then about 2 tablespoons of salt. Though this is fine salt, so I'll probably just do 1.5. If it was kosher salt or heavier grain salt, I'd do a bit more. I'll do 1/2 tablespoon of cracked pepper, and then I've got a tablespoon. I'll probably do probably 2 tablespoons of paprika, a tablespoon of onion powder, and a tablespoon of garlic powder. And that should be pretty good. You could add heat to it if you want. You could add some chili or something, but we just like this to be the sweet and smoky sort of a standard flavour. So I'll mix that up like that. Alright, next I'm going to grab the roast. So there you go. I took the skin off the roast, tied it back up, rolled it back up. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it in some mustard. Now, I buy this Dijon mustard from Costco. It's a nice big container. It's something that I haven't made yet, so if you have a good recipe for it, then let me know, because I'd like to try. And then I coat it all in the mustard. And then start covering it in the rub. Now I've got the fan on, which isn't helping anything, but it's keeping the flies away. That, and then I'm going to get Darryl to turn the smoker on for me and throw it in the smoker. Alrighty, so next step, I've got some jars washed here. I'm using some Fowler's Ricola jars. They're Australian canning jar, and these are number 27s, which I can't remember what it holds, but they're not my smallest, not my largest, and they use a size 3 ring. So I'm going to chunk up this pork and place it in the jars as the first step. Now this is raw packing, so the jars are cold and it will go in cold water in the canner, and I just cut chunks so that it fits neatly in the jar. It all ends up being pretty much pulled meat, so it doesn't really matter what shape you put it in there in the first place. And as I said, you have to You want a little bit of fat in there because the fat helps keep the meat moist, and fat is flavour. But you also don't want too much because it can impact the seal on the jars. So I'm just going to go through, keep chunking all this up. Now the pork comes out just melt in your mouth, pulled pork. It's great. I've seen some recipes that do it in barbecue sauce and things like that, like a barbecue pulled pork, but we prefer to just do it like this because then it's a blank slate for whatever we want to put it on. So if we wanted to add homemade barbecue sauce to it once for a specific meal, all we have to do is empty the jar into a pot and add the barbecue sauce that we want to flavour it with. But generally speaking, we don't. We just eat it as is. So this is a rolled leg, which means that there's some pieces that have some really nice, solid flesh, and there's some pieces that with some really nice marbling, and there's some pieces that have a fair bit of fat on them. So I find it a good mix, and I just put it into I mix up those pieces in the jars as I'm going, so that each jar has a good variety of meaty pieces as well as fatty pieces to help with the proportion of fat that's in each jar and keeps the meat nice and moist. These pork legs are just so versatile for such a cheap cut of meat. There's so much you can do with them if you just think about it and are willing to put a little bit of effort in. They make some really cheap meals. The other thing about canning it like this too is that it's good portion control. So like that roast that I'm smoking now, we will eat that. Luckily I just cleaned my bench down. We will eat that in 1 or 2 sittings, whereas this other half of the pork is going to make 5 odd meals. So that's a bit too much fat there. So it means that we've stretched this pork into as many meals as possible. There we go. So we just loosely pack it in there, so we end up with 5 jars there. That over the bowl. Alright, so now I'm going to get these ready for the canner. Alrighty, so I've got lids here. I've given them a quick clean. I've got, let me turn this fan, some vinegar in a little bowl here, and I'm going to clean the rims of each of these jars. Check for any imperfections in the rims, make sure that any grease has been removed. That. Alright, now Fowler's jars have a rubber gasket ring goes on them. Just like that. Make sure it's not twisted. Those. go. Now I like to run my cloth with a bit of vinegar just around the edges of those gaskets because I'm using my hands to put them on, and so I was having a few problems with jars not sealing, and I think it might have been grease that was on my hands when I put the rings on. So now I just give them a quick wipe down and then place these lids. I give them a wipe down too if I think they need it. I did just wash them though, but I like to just double check because it's all a waste of time if I put these in the canner and they don't seal. That's not true. We still just means you need to eat whatever's in them rather than straight away, rather than putting it on the shelf. Or you can reprocess it, though I don't know that I would reprocess meat because it's already really well cooked the first time. So, but anyway, there's those, and then I need some clips. Now, I double clip my jars purely because, again, I want it to work. Like, you can single clip them, double clipping them, I don't know if it makes a whole lot of difference, but it just helps keep that lid in contact with the ring, and it just makes me feel like there's more chance of success. So, and I have enough clips to do it, so why not? Clip all these up. And I just realised I didn't add any salt to these jars. You can, but you don't have to, so I'm not going to worry about it. So these are ready to go. Now, cold meat, cold jars, so it goes in cold water in the canner. There's already water in the canner because I did chicken stock this morning. So that's why I decided to do this as well. So I'm just going to put them straight in the canner. So these jars are a little larger than a pint, a little smaller than a quart. So I'm going to process them for quart times, which is 90 minutes from cold, with all the usuals. Letting it vent for 10 minutes and then timing from when the weight starts rocking. Now, I prefer to run the canner when I get a full load, but I don't have any other proteins at the moment to can. So nothing else that requires 90 minutes of canning. So I'm just going to run the 5 jars, and realistically 90 minutes to cook pulled pork is fairly minimal in the scheme of things. Like if I was making pulled pork in an oven or in the slow cooker or whatever, it would take me a lot longer. So 90 minutes to run the canner isn't that bad, but I do prefer to do a whole canner load if I can. So I can fit, I think it's 12 of those jars in the buffalo canner. I can't double stack them because they're the Fowler's jars with the clips, makes them too high. My ball jars or twist top jars I can double stack, but those ones have to be a single layer, so that works fine. But yeah, I would normally try and do a full canner load if I had something else to can, but yeah, not today. So this is the potato, crackle over the potato with the fat, tray number 1. Tray number 2. So all the potatoes are roasted, all the fat's rendered in the bottom. Yummy, tasty snack that uses up the whole roast. I tend to pick it straight out of the trays and put it on the rack fairly quickly, otherwise the potatoes just absorb most of the fat and we don't get as much fat to put in the jar. So better off to just pull them out of the trays and put them on a drainage rack over the trays that I'm going to drain the fat off. There we have it. 2 trays, potato, crackle, to go as a side for dinner tonight. This is our jar for our dirty fat. It's not the stuff that's rendered clean. This is what we use to pour the trays and stuff into. So we just add it on top as we need to. Alrighty, the pork in the canner has done its 90 minutes, then the pressure has come down, and so I've opened the lid and I'm ready to pull it out to put it on a board to let sit for 24 hours. So there you go. That is, let me bring you in a bit closer. Lighting, we're losing light out here too, which doesn't help. So all the liquid in these jars is purely from the pork itself. I didn't add any liquid to the jars, so that's just the liquid from the pork itself, and the bubbling means that the jars are under pressure, which is what you want. And these are all settled down, and then in 24 hours I can take the clips off and then put them on the shelf. So it's 7:45 at night. Things took a little longer than intended. I'm just getting the pork out of the smoker now. It's just hit the right temperature. So I'm going to show you that as I pull it out, and I'll let it rest for a little bit and then I'll slice it up and show you that too. At least, being this late at night, I don't have to battle the flies. But yes, there is our pork. Now I cook it to an internal temperature of 72 if I'm going to slice it, and go higher if I'm going to pull it. So this was just done to 72 in the thickest, meatiest part of the roast. Looks pretty good. Alrighty, rested for a bit, so now I'm going to slice into it so we can have some with our dinner. Perfect. This will be dinner tonight, meat tomorrow as well, however long it lasts. It's really nice when it's done like this. So there you go. So that's it. So that is how we use the whole leg of pork. We use from start to finish and make multiple meals with a cheap cut. So I hope that's helped some people who were curious about the way we try and use entire cuts and, you know, budget, low income, off grid. This is the sort of thing that we do. So if you enjoyed this, then let me know and I can keep on doing some of the similar things. Each month we get different cuts and use them in different ways, but this is definitely one that we use a lot. It just makes sense. It's just really good on budget, but really good on taste, the way we do it as well. So I hope you all enjoyed, and let me know in the comments if anything I can fix with the videos, or if there's anything else you'd like me to make videos on or anything like that. And it'd be great if you could subscribe and hit the bell if you want to be notified when I release new videos. I'm hoping to do them every couple of days. Alrighty, see you later, see you next time.